Hello, everybody. Welcome to Geezerology.
Hello there.
I'm Scott. That's Bob. And today, after Bob told you about three of his favorite live albums last week, I'm going to talk about three of mine this week. Before we do that, though, I have a question to ask, but not a question, just a couple of comments. I wanted him to react to a couple of things. Bob, as you know, if you read our blog at geezerology.com, has kind of become our resident Doug Yule historian. Somebody that Bob never heard of a month ago, and now Bob's become quite the Doug Yule scholar.
That is literally true. Didn't even know who he was a month ago.
Bob wrote a blog post a couple of 3 weeks ago about the Velvet Underground's Loaded album. This is after we discussed this on YouTube, and Bob touched on during that article about how much credit he thinks Doug Yule should get for the success of Loaded, what made it such a great album. And I found it interesting as somebody who has followed the Velvet Underground and know their albums for going on a half a century. That's something that I never thought of that much. And when Bob mentioned it, I thought, that's true. I mean, there is a lot of Doug Yule in this album, but it's never talked about. And you read books, you read articles, you read retrospectives on this stuff, and that's a point that's never discussed. And it took somebody listening to this album for the first time and analyzing it and looking at it from a fresh perspective and seeing this, and I found it interesting, and I just wanted Bob to touch on that a little bit about how Doug Yule really deserves more credit than history has given him, and also what got me thinking about it again was Bob wrote a nice blog post last week about how David Bowie met Doug Yule one time at a Velvet Underground show, but it turned out to be a Velvet Underground show after Lou Reed had left. Well, Bowie walked away thinking that he had met Lou Reed for the first time. I never heard that story, and Bob came up with a couple of interviews where both Bowie and Doug Yule confirmed that is a true story. But anyway, that got me thinking about Doug Yule again. So after all this time, I wanted to turn it over to Bob and just give us a little bit of insight about on your thoughts of Doug Yule's role in that last Velvet Underground album.
I'd be glad to, Scott. When you challenged me to listen to that album, I had no real preconceptions about it. I knew who the Velvets were. I recognized, Lou Reed's songwriting ability and all that, but other than that, I really did not know anything about them. So my first listen to Loaded, the first song out, Who Needs the Sun, just blew me away. I mean, I listened to it and I'm thinking already some Beatle comparisons. I was surprised at how nice it sounded. The vocals were awesome. And I thought I was listening to Lou Reed. And the first time I heard it, I was like, man, Lou learned how to sing. I mean, that's literally what I thought. And then it segues to Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll, which are Reed's vocals. And I noticed a real difference. And my first thought was, man, did they screw up the mixing on this or something? So I continue listening to it, and I hear interspersed, some variation in the vocals. And I still did not know that it wasn't Lou Reed. I just, was literally thinking he had found a different singing style for some of the songs. Well, then I started researching it, and I discovered that some of those vocals were being done by Doug Yule, which led me to do a little bit more research. And I love the album, and we talked about that. I think the songs were fantastic. Reed wrote some great songs for it, but I really thought that Doug Yule's vocals really helped carry a lot of the songs on that album. And I know from everything I know now, it is something of a departure from previous Velvet stuff. And I guess real serious Velvet purists probably look down at it. But I thought it was a great album, and I got that from not having any preconceived notions about, you know, the history of the band. And I think it's a great album. I know some people.
Well, it's more though than just the fact, and you pointed out, it's more than the fact that Yule sang, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 leads on that album, but it was more than that. It was basically, and as I got looking at it further and thinking about it, that Yule, I mean, Reed came in, he wrote the songs, and he sang many of the songs, a little more than half of the songs, and he played a little bit of guitar, but really a big chunk of the instrumentation
came from
yes. Yule.
Yeah. Plus, from what I understand, maybe even some of the final mixing of the album. Right.
Well, Reed left when Yule and Selznick were still editing, putting together the final product, doing all the post-production work. No, I just found that interesting because that's something that Velvet Underground scholars and fans never consider much. You know, it's like Yule was just kind of this guy who was there to replace John Cale, and not a whole lot of credence is ever given to his contributions to that album.
I think something to really have an interesting hypothetical discussion about would be, what would Yule and Reed have done had Reed not walked away, and they would have continued a partnership in the band? I wonder where that would have led.
Yeah, probably not, because they were going in 2 different directions.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was probably the. Yeah, that was the end of that road. I really believe that, because Reed is through all those years, and then he had a solo career for 40 years after that, and he was never known as one who was a great collaborator.
Right.
Yeah. It was. Lou was the boss. And Lou became the boss after Cale left. And that was one of the reasons why Cale left, is because there were just these 2 heads butting. And so Reed became the boss and became his band. And then what happened with Loaded, I believe, is that Selznick, the manager, decided that Doug Yule was the direction that the Velvet Underground needed to go, and Lou said, enough of this. I don't want this anymore.
I love the songs on Loaded. Great songwriting. I don't think I would have liked the album nearly as much if Yule had not been a participant at the level that he was. You know, with the vocals, and he did some great guitar work on there.
He carried a lot of the load of that album.
Now, I don't know whether that was because, Reed was checking out or what, but I think that he and Reed working together made a fantastic album there. And I think if Yule would have taken a back seat, I don't think I would have liked the album nearly as much. But
if Reed wouldn't have taken a back seat, that might have been a rerun of the 3rd album, the self-titled album, which is the first one that Yule played on, and Yule wasn't, and Yule was just kind of there for that album, and that was a Lou Reed album. And
so now, I don't know the history of the Velvets anywhere near as well as you do, obviously, but from what little I have seen so far, I think Doug gets a bad rap that he doesn't deserve. And I've listened a little bit to, what is it, Squeeze? Is that was the other?
Squeeze, yeah.
I listened to a little bit of it.
Squeeze was it was a solo Doug Yule album a year or 2 later that it was a solo Doug Yule album where he did pretty much everything in the studio, but it was released as as an album by the Velvet Underground.
I listened to a little bit on it, and it really didn't do much of anything for me one way or the other.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe Doug on his own, you know, but Doug and Reed working together, they did something really not great there.
He never did much musically after that. In fact, I just read recently that he has had a pretty good career as a cabinet maker. You know, and he's always turned up on like, you know, these little knockoff you know, little Velvet Underground documentaries, you know, like, I don't know, you know, there's a million of those things that go around, little 1 hour TV show episodes that just pop up here and there. And, you know, Doug Yule is always interviewed in those, but he actually did do a little session work on a couple of Reed's early solo albums.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Which I'll get into later. I'm getting ready to embark on some stuff about Lou Reed on the blog, but anyway, I just wanted to get that out there because I just thought it was an interesting take, and it's something I've been thinking about since you wrote that you know, this is something that people just don't give much consideration to. I don't know that Yule ever really got a bad rap so much as that he just has been forgotten and overlooked.
Well, some of the things I came across,
and the rest of the band froze him out when the band got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They refused to let Yule be a part of that. And yeah, and well, I think what happened. I think there was some personal animosity over what happened with the Velvet Underground. That Maureen Tucker got fired actually from the Velvet Underground because Susnick didn't want to pay her to go on tour. You know, when he booked the Velvet Underground tour, he booked a couple of cheaper musicians and fired Mo Tucker, and that probably contributed to that animosity. I'm sure it did. But anyway, but he kind of became a ghost. Like I say, it's funny that he did a little bit of session, not a lot, but a little bit of session work with Reed afterward. But Reed talked very ill of him for a long time, even though he employed him a couple of times after that. Okay, Bob, before I get to my live albums, anything else you want to touch on real quick? Okay.
I think I'm good for right now.
Okay. Okay. Just following up from Bob's discussion last week, I wanted to talk about 3 live albums that I hold dear to my heart. I've never ever really been a fan of live albums. I've always got early on when I first started diving into listening to music as a serious pursuit. You know, I would buy the live albums of the bands and the artists I was a fan of, but I got pretty early on. I got kind of tired of it because I always thought that these things were just most of the time when somebody put out a live album, they were just regurgitating basically their studio catalog up to that point, and I always saw it as pretty much a money grab because most of the time I found nothing interesting about these live albums. It's just their catalogs, a catalog of their songs that actually sounded better on the original studio recordings. So I came to look at, when I started thinking about my favorite live albums, I started thinking about, okay, what live albums are out there that have something to say on their own and are just not a regurgitation of what you've already heard on a studio album. I think when it really ended that was when Chicago. Remember, Chicago put out their first 3 records were double albums. And then after Chicago 3, they came out with Live at Carnegie Hall, which was which was a live double album, but because it was Chicago's double album, it was a 4-record set. And I went, and, you know, at that time, I mean, that was expensive, and I bought it, and I listened to it, and it was just all the same songs that I already had in the first 3 albums. It's like, what's the point of this? And then, you know, and then I started seeing a pattern emerge that every time I bought a live album, it was just the same stuff that I already have. So the hell with it, I'm done with it. And I don't know. Do bands even do live albums anymore?
I don't know.
I don't know if they do, but now in the video age, it's like, you know, a lot of you can go on YouTube or you know, go to Best Buy to the DVD section or whatever, and they all put out live videos, which I get into because you know, you get the whole visual aspect of their live show, which adds a whole nother dimension to it. But back in the day, we didn't have that. So anyway, let's get to it. I'm gonna talk about these in chronological order. These aren't necessarily the order that I like them in, but they're in order of when they came out. And the first one we're going to talk about is that little gem right there.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And you can see that's been in my collection for about 50 years, give or take a month or two.
Yeah,
that's a you can tell that's gotten a little bit of use. The door is absolutely live. This was recorded. Well, first of all, let me tell you why I think that this is such a good live album. This Paul Rothchild, who was the Doors producer, decided that he wanted to make it's a double record. He wanted to make a set that, if you start playing it from the beginning of the record and go all the way through the end, he wanted to give you the feeling of what it was like to listen to a Doors concert, to be at a Doors concert. You know, obviously just the audio, not the sight of it. And this album's taken a lot of criticism because it was one of the first ones that we learned of that these weren't really straight performances. You know, they're pretty edited up. It sounds seamless. Rothschild did a perfect job. I mean, you start from the beginning, go to the end. From the book ended from the beginning house announcement where he tells people to go sit down and let's be cool and let's not cause any riots or anything, till the very end. And the very end of the album, that house announcer is back talking, telling people, inviting people to go to the gift shop on their way out, spend their money. But it does sound like an album, like a concert from beginning to end. And it's not. We know it's not. Rothschild has said so much. No, this isn't. We didn't just start the tape and roll the tape and then put it on record. This was recorded at shows over the course of about a year. What I found was that the first recording that appears on this album was in July 1969, and the last one was May of 1970. And so that's, you know, that's a little short of a year. And it was released in July of 1970. This album is, if you think of a live album, it's not a live album. It's a heavily edited album. Bits and pieces from all these different shows are all put together. Rothschild did a beautiful job making this thing seamless. But I just find it interesting that Rothschild had a quote here. He said there must be 2,000 edits on this album. He spent a lot of time putting this together. I don't know what that means. I'm not a technician, but think of that. He said there must be 2,000 edits on that album. Something lasts, what, 70 minutes? You listen to one of these tracks, you go through one of these tracks, and it sounds seamless. You know, obviously, from what we know, and Rothschild even said that one track, he didn't get specific. He said, but well, any particular track, it could be part of that could have been from Detroit, part of it could have been from Los Angeles, part of it could have been from Philadelphia. He never got so specific, but I've listened to this really hard, trying to figure that out, and it's seamless. He did a beautiful job on putting this album together. Anyway, this was Absolutely Live was released July 1970. It was re-released in the CD era as part of a package called In Concert, which also included the Doors' later live album Live She Cried, and also Live at the Hollywood Bowl. There you go, Bob's. And it was re-released in 1996 as Absolutely Live again with different cover art. And then it came out on vinyl. It was re-released on vinyl again in 2010 in its original format and its original cover. Those of you who are interested. This is my favorite Doors album. I absolutely love this. I've loved this thing for 50 years, and it's so funny. I haven't listened to it in a while. I'll go back to the thing every 4 or 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, however long. I mean, I go long gaps without listening to it, and I just listened to it again last night, and every time I listen to this thing, it takes my breath away at how great this album is. It's, you know, I don't understand all the criticisms of it. It's great. This is the Doors. This is the Doors and the Doors pure form right here. Absolutely Live. Bob, I know that this one's in your wheelhouse. Do you have anything to add?
All I can do is just emphasize the same things that you just said. Same thing with me. I had not listened to this for quite a while. Yeah. And when you and I started this venture of doing our musical stuff, and we knew that we were going to be on the Doors, I dug out all of my Doors CDs, albums, and everything. And I listened to Absolutely Live, and it's in my car. And every time I travel somewhere, I listen to it. And I just fall in love with it all over again. I agree with you 100%. It captivates me. It's awesome. And so much. I mean, it shows what the Doors were like on stage. And the thing that always amazed me about them is how fantastic those musicians were to be able to follow Morrison on whatever path he decided to go on. And yeah, so I agree with you 100%. It's a fantastic piece of work. I did not know it was that heavily edited, though. That's awesome because it does sound, I knew it wasn't all one continuous show. I knew it was from different shows, but I did not know that there was that much editing even amongst the individual songs. And it doesn't diminish it for me because it's still an awesome listening experience. But I got to hand it to Paul Rothschild, and he did a fantastic job if it did have that much editing in it.
Yeah, 2,000 edits. That kills me. That's a direct quote from Rothschild. This also, I do remember when I first got this. This was the first picture I ever saw of bearded fat Jim Morrison. That's the first time I ever saw that. It was such a shock to me. I remember.
Yeah, he went from being
I did read that when this album came out, that Morrison was pissed with this album cover because that's a photo of him from 3 years earlier. He had already, this was in the aftermath. This was all these concerts were recorded in the aftermath of Miami.
Right.
And actually, this album was released after Morrison Hotel. Morrison Hotel was in February 1970. This was released in July of 1970. But the music covers through the Soft Parade. There's nothing from Morrison Hotel on here. In fact, the only thing from the Soft Parade on here is the opening of the Soft Parade title track, the Petition the Lord with Prayer. Just really quickly though, before I let go of this, there are several tracks on this live album that did not appear on a Doors studio album, including the I don't know how long that is, the Celebration of the Lizard, which if you know what that is, that was a long piece that Morrison had written for the Waiting for the Sun album that was originally supposed to take up a full side on the Waiting for the Sun album, but they there's a lot of different stories, but the most credible story I've heard is that they just never could get it right in the studio, and so they abandoned it. They actually printed the lyrics on the inside gatefold of the Waiting for the Sun album. So it was a last minute decision. But the Celebration of the Lizard is about, let me see if I can see a time on this. No, there's no time listed just specifically for that track. But my guess is it's probably a 15-minute track. Side 4 is 21-minute total, and it ends with Soul Kitchen. Yeah, so it's probably 14 or 15-minute track. A good half of that track is Morrison reciting poetry. It's a big long story where there are a couple of musical interludes in there, but it's mostly a big long Jim Morrison poem. And this is really the first time that we ever heard Jim Morrison reciting poetry. The medley on side 1, Alabama Song, Backdoor Man, Love Hides 5-1, it's fabulous. I love that. Bob and I talked about the studio version of When the Music's Over, and I kept telling him how much I really disliked the studio version of When the Music's Over. The live version on this album is killer. It's killer.
One of the other highlights for me is the segment with "Not to Touch the Earth, Not to See the Sun, Nothing Left to Do But."
Well, that's in the middle of Celebration of the Lizard.
Right. Yeah,
that's a middle section of the Celebration of the Lizard. Yeah.
So incredibly powerful. Every time I hear that, it's just so awesome. And
the thing of it is that when they recorded that, they did have that "Not to Touch the Earth" as a song in the middle of side 2 on Waiting for the Sun, and I think they actually recorded that pretty well in the studio. It doesn't have the live energy, but I thought they did it. But here, Break On Through. To me, the studio version, the original single on the debut album, just pales in comparison to the energy you get on that song on this album. And the same with Soul Kitchen from the debut album.
And the other thing is, Ray Manzarek carries vocals on Close to You and actually does a good job on this album. But later on, when he tried doing the vocals, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I really like his version of Close to You on this live album, but it's like later on, it's like, Ray, stay with the keyboards, you can't sing.
Yeah, and I'm not going. I have never read this or anything, but it would not shock me if I were to learn at some point that there was some overdubbing going on this record, because everything sounds. And the other thing I wanted to mention too before we walk away is that Robbie Krieger is killer on this Absolute Live album. He really shines. He really shines on this live album.
Krieger has always been an underrated guitarist. I think he's just got some awesome styles, and you're right. Yes, fantastic.
Okay, my number 2 album, and we've already been down this road, but I just felt that I had to at least bring it up during this discussion. Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
Yes, another great one.
This is the best album that Joe Cocker ever recorded, without doubt. That's why I think that makes this is an essential Joe Cocker album. This is the only Joe Cocker album that you will ever have to listen to if you're curious about Joe Cocker. Later, a few years ago, there was an album came out of his full performance at Woodstock, which we had never heard until just a few years ago, which is fabulous. Is right on the same order of this, only with a smaller grease band and not this big community of a band that he had. The studio. This was Cocker's third album. He recorded 2 studio albums before this. They're both pretty good. One of them, the debut, was With a Little Help from My Friends. And the second one was a self-titled where he had a couple of Leon Russell songs, a couple of Dylan songs. His first time he recorded, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. But if you listen to those two studio albums and then listen to Mad Dogs and Englishmen, there's a world of difference. Cocker was just too big for a studio. Studio could not contain him. Here on stage and doing his live album on his stages with this big band around him, everything was big, and that was exactly the perfect environment for Joe Cocker. Yeah, we've talked about this on a previous video, so I won't get too much further into this. But Bob, was there anything you want to add about Mad Dogs and Englishmen before we move on?
Other than I would just say that is your Desert Island Joe Cocker album.
Oh yeah, without question. Recorded in March 1970 and released in August of 1970.
And I guess you could also say it's your Desert Island Leon Russell album too.
Yeah, we had that discussion last time, and I got to thinking afterward. That was kind of a little unfair to Joe Cocker because this is a Joe Cocker album. Leon Russell was a musical director. He was a producer. He was the guy who put this whole thing together. He was the guy who arranged all the songs and everything like this. But there's no doubt that Cocker is the star of this album.
Oh, no doubt about that. And I recognize Leon Russell's genius. I won't say he's my favorite performer. So Leon Russell by himself on his own, I'm so, but here it's great because he's collaborating, and I think it's, it makes him a little more listenable.
Well, yeah, I mean, Leon Russell built his career on being a collaborator. He was a longtime studio musician before he became a star. He made, I don't know how many albums he recorded as a solo artist, but he made a dent. He made a dent with some of his records. Okay, number 3. That's about 48 years.
Yeah,
it's been around. So yeah,
it's another road warrior.
That's another road warrior. Yeah, all 3 of these albums have been around 48, 50 years. Lou Reed's Rock and Roll Animal. This was from one show in New York. I have that in here in my notes here. In December of 1973. This was right after Reed released his 3rd album, Berlin. And his original intent, Berlin, was Reed's concept album that he followed up with Transformer, and he wanted to take Berlin on the road. The album, Berlin, just got slammed. It got slammed by the critics. It didn't sell very well. It was just a huge shock after Transformer. It's like people going, "What the hell is this?" It took Reed, and all of a sudden but Reed finally did take Berlin on the road, put together a band, and took that on the road and did a show of that. That was in about 2010. so about 38 years or so after he originally intended to do it, he actually put the same band together and everything. But anyway, he realized that he or his record company, whoever, they all made the decision that taking Berlin on the road wasn't going to happen. So this was his quote Berlin tour. He put together this band, including Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, a two-prong guitar blast, Penty Gland, Precious John, and this is the band that became Alice Cooper's band for a long time. And this is what makes this so good, and this is an essential Lou Reed album. This is not, people, I've heard people describe that as Lou doing heavy metal. It's not heavy metal, but it's big arena rock. Like, you know, in 1973, this is before arena rock became a thing. This is arena rock. This is what people like Foreigner and Journey and all those people did in the later 70s. You know, you just play in these big places. This thing is big. And it's a style of music that Reed never ever did in the studio. He did this live on stage, and it was huge and it was big, and this became his biggest selling album, Rock and Roll Animal. It was so successful that in the year later, in 1975, they released an album called Lou Reed Live, which was six other songs from that same show. It was just leftovers from the same show. Later, they remastered Rock and Roll Animal and added 2 more tracks on that and sent it out. So then it became between the remastered version of Rock and Roll Animal and the follow-up Lou Reed Live, you had that entire show on these 2 albums. They weren't, the songs weren't in sequence, they resequenced them, but the entire show ended up on those 2 albums. And the Lou Reed Live album, the follow-up album, actually was fairly successful. It's not as good as Rock and Roll Animal. It would be, because they took the best stuff and put it on this one, on the first one. This, Bob, have you heard this version of Sweet Jane?
No, I have not.
I suspect that you have on the radio. It was a big radio hit. This version of Sweet Jane was a big radio hit for a couple of 3 years.
And I probably heard it and didn't know.
You probably heard it and just didn't realize what it was. Yeah, this is good stuff. And this, as it turns out, on Rock and Roll Animal, there's 5 tracks on this album. One of them is from Berlin, which was his current album, and the other 4 tracks are recycled Velvet Underground songs. When it was remastered with 2 more tracks, there were 2 more tracks from the Berlin album. Lou Reed Live had 3 tracks from Transformer, 1 from the Velvet Underground, and then 2 more from Berlin. Great stuff. Big, huge arena rock sound. If you've heard the version of Lou Reed of Sweet Jane off of this, you know exactly what you're getting. It's just big and loud and massive.
Now, when you say big and loud and massive, we're not talking like Joe Cocker with 40 people on stage.
No. It was a 5
more rock oriented, or
like I say, it's just arena rock. It's just 2 in your face guitar, 2 guitar leads,
okay.
A keyboard player, bass player, and then Lou on vocals. Lou was just a front man here. He was.
Oh, really? Okay.
Reed stopped playing guitar for most of the 70s. Reed didn't play guitar. He just got on stage and sang. In fact, it was around 1980 when he started playing guitar again.
Well, you know, when I listened to Loaded and Sweet Jane came on, and I listened to Sweet Jane, and it just didn't sound right to me. And I said, something's off here. So, you know, I'm on my iPad on Apple Music. So I switched over to Velvet Underground Live 69, I think. And I listened to Sweet Jane there. And I said, yeah, that's more the Sweet Jane that I know. So
that's just because it's the first one. Yeah.
Now, so I probably have heard that somewhere in my life, because the studio version of Sweet Jane sounded odd. So
it was a different song. In 1969, the version of Sweet Jane in 1969 was a very early draft of Sweet Jane. But it was a different song. It was basically the Sweet Jane that we now know. There's that part at the end, Heavenly Wine and Roses, is sort of a bridge. Well, that was the song. That was the body of the song originally. It was very slow and very ballad. And then he reworked it as the rock and roll Sweet Jane that turned up on Loaded.
So with
And
me
then
being
this,
more,
and then this is taking the Loaded version and making it even bigger.
okay. So with me being kind of a straight ahead rock and roll guy or rock guy, I'd probably like this.
I would think so.
Yeah. Okay. I got to listen to it then,
I
because
would
I've never
think
heard it
so.
in its entirety.
Yeah, I would think
In
so.
fact, to be honest with you, I've seen that album title. I didn't even know it was a live album.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this it's the opening track is about I don't know, 2 or 3 minute just a guitar intro, and you know it's a song we've never heard before. It's Hunter and Wagner and the band just doing a big bombastic instrumental, something we've never heard before, and then all of a sudden you hear applause in the background. And then all of a sudden that dun, 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 dun. And so what it is, that's when Reed enters the stage. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to listen to this.
And I mean that's definitely the highlight of the album. It also includes, then side 1 concludes with a version of Heroin, and then side B is White Light, White Heat, Lady Day from Berlin, and then it closes with Rock and Roll. And it's all. It all burns. Yeah, I think you'd like it. You should take a listen to it.
Sounds like it'll be right up my alley then if it's got that kind of approach to it.
Yeah, you should have a listen to it and then write about it, or come on YouTube and discuss it.
I would. So do you recommend just listening to the original Rock and Roll Animal, or going for the remastered where the whole show is there?
No, the whole show is the remastered Rock and Roll Animal just adds a couple tracks. To get the whole show, you have to listen to the remastered Rock and Roll Animal and the album Lou Reed Live.
Okay, I misunderstood. They didn't put the 2 albums together.
No. They may have at some point they may have packaged them together as like a double CD or something, but officially in the official catalog they're 2 separate albums. But all of them from the same show. No, just I mean, actually, the Lou Reed Live and probably the remastered one is probably redundant. I mean, if you listen to the original version of Rock and Roll Animal, you've got what you need to hear.
Okay. So the picture on the cover, is that how he looked on stage during that tour?
Yes. Yep, he cropped his hair. He cropped his hair and started wearing a dog collar and playing this what that character is referred to as the fucking faggot junkie. Right after the show, he actually went out on a long tour. This is just a quick show that they put together in New York, and he went out on a long tour after that. And right after this, they recorded his next album, which is Sally Can't Dance, which turned out to be his biggest selling studio album of his career, and it's one of his is one of his less good albums. But for that, he kept his hair cropped short, and he dyed it. He bleached it so white. So he went out on tour. I saw him on that tour in St. Louis with a little bit different band. It wasn't these 2 guitar players, but it was the same. It was the same kind of band. It was and he did that for a while. And during Heroin, famously, during the song Heroin, he goes to the back of the stage and takes a microphone and wraps the cord around his arm and does the whole, yeah.
So 2 questions for you. Transformer has Walk on the Wild Side, is that correct?
Correct.
And that came out before Rock and Roll Animal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and Rock and Roll Animal, you said was 73.
Rock and Roll Animal is 70. Well, yeah, recorded in December of 73.
Okay.
released
So
in February
I
74.
don't know if this is if this is off base or not, but his change in appearance, going from the curly hair and the sunglasses to this caricature, not caricature, but character. Was that a David Bowie influence by any chance?
Yeah, yeah, it was all, the Transformer became, I mean, it wasn't the first glam album. T-Rex and Bowie had done one or two before that, but Bowie and Mick Ronson produced a Transformer album, and it became sort of, along with Bowie's Ziggy Stardust, it became the iconic glam album of that time. And to the point, and Reed was just starting his solo career at this point. He disappeared for a while and then came back. Transformer was his second solo album, and it became this this glam icon. And I think he took that and ran with it, and where Bowie and Mark Bolan and all of them, went to this highly sexualized, colorful, flamboyant thing. Reed took that and decided to go the dark side with it, and that's what this is all about, with the cropped hair and the dog collar and the muscle t-shirts. Yeah, he took glam to the dark side. He didn't stay with that very long. It was just something that he kind of dabbled in, but it became it became the Lou Reed that people
Right.
identified with.
Yeah, that's the Lou Reed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I never heard that album, but I remember the photograph.
Yeah,
and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. It took a long time for him to get past that in the public perception of him, because it was so flamboyant and out there, and his behavior got really weird during that time.
I remember
to the point where he and people, and I remember thinking that, but people didn't think he was going to live to see 40 years old.
Well, I don't know about you sophisticated guys in St. Louis, but down in my neck of the woods, like Walk on the Wild Side was kind of a shocking song.
Yeah, he does Walk on the Wild. That turns up on the Lou Reed Live version. A couple others from Transformer. It was pretty equal between on that show. I'm just putting it together. On that show, about half of it was VU songs, and the other half was, and a quarter of it was Transformer, and a quarter of it was Berlin. Yeah, Bob. Anything to add?
Well, yeah, a couple things real quickly.
Okay.
One, I found something new to listen to, or something old that I should listen to that I hadn't heard before, which is Lou Reed Live. And then I wanted to kind of add on to your initial commentary about live albums as a whole. And when I was young, I was always kind of thrilled about a live album, because it's like, oh man, I get to hear what my band really sounds like and stuff. So I naively thought that I'm hearing what they really did live. And then as I grew up and got more sophisticated, I'm starting to learn about all of the overdubbing and the work that goes into these live albums, and how the band may not like that guitar run, so they do one in the studio and dub it in. And then I even found out that some of them weren't even actual live shows. Like Steppenwolf Live, there are two cuts on there that are studio that they put audience noise on.
Right.
It sound like
somebody else did that too, famously.
Yeah.
And I forget who.
And then like The Last Waltz, which is hailed as a great live recording. That thing was so reworked And Bobby Robertson and Levon Helm actually had a big fight about it because Helm refused to do any overdubbing of his stuff.
Right.
He said, I want people to hear what I did. And Robertson heavily reworked a lot of that stuff. So it kind of, I lost my naivete along the way, you know, so now I'm a lot more selective about the live albums that I do like, that I think are great. So I'm not nearly as naive about that stuff as I used to be.
Yeah, I think for marketing purposes, obviously, is why that happened. But I think that yeah, that was deceptive. That was deceptive, and it always was. The one thing about that Doors album is even though we didn't know it, I mean, Rothschild never kept that a secret. It's just that, you know, I mean, we didn't have the media coverage of these things then that we do now, and that was never a secret. And Rothschild said from the beginning that what he was trying to do there was to build the experience, not a document, but an experience.
Right.
You know?
And I don't begrudge what they did to Absolutely Live, because all of the concert footage that I've seen of the Doors, I believe that album accurately captures what they were like on stage. And you know, so I think it's a faithful document to how it felt to be at a Doors show.
I would say a faithful representation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a faithful document, but
okay.
Faithful representation. Yeah. And that, you know, and that's why I kind of figured that out a long time ago. That's why I never got it, especially with after that Chicago fiasco with that Live at Carnegie Hall. It's like, you know what, I'm done with this crap. And that's why my three favorite live albums are from the early '70s or from 50 years ago, because that was before the live albums. That was before live albums became a marketing ploy, and they were just another document of they were another product of these artists' career. You know, they weren't just replication. They weren't just replications. You know, each one of those three albums that I just talked about were making a statement, an artistic statement on their own.
Yeah. Real nitpicky point. Wasn't at least part of the Chicago Transit Authority album live?
They had side four. The bulk of side four was about an 18-minute long. Yeah, and it was a live track.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I never could figure out is that like, you know, you go buy an album and then all of a sudden they have one track on there that's, you know, they say it's recorded live. It's like, why? What's the point of it? What's the point of this?
I don't know. Terry Kath was a pretty incredible guitarist.
No, I love that track. I think it's a great track. It's a great 18-minute Terry Kath spotlight. You know, it's a great. I love that track. That's my favorite track on the album. But
yeah, it may have been a cheap
but it's like the whole idea of like all of a sudden, you know, you got a studio album here, and all of a sudden in the middle of it or at the end of it or whatever, you drop in a live track. It's like, what is the point of that? I never understood the reasoning behind that. Never made any sense to me. Okay, Bob, we're getting a little long here, so let's go ahead and call it a day. Anything you're working on specifically?
Yeah, I'm putting together, I'm going to do a little story about the history of Badfinger. They've got probably the most tragic history of any band in the rock era.
Okay.
And I would like to let people, you know, I think it's a sad story, but I think it's an interesting one. So I'm going to write up a bio about Badfinger.
Badfinger, okay, that's somebody I haven't thought of in a while.
Yeah, I hadn't either, and I heard a song last week, and I said, man, I haven't heard Badfinger in forever. And then I stumbled across something about, and I knew they had some issues in their history, but I didn't know just how bad it really was. So I said, man, this is a story that people need to know.
Okay. Yeah, I'm same old stuff with me. I've talked about it before. I'm going to put together a few. I figured out how I'm going to organize my my novel on Lou Reed. I'm not going to go by decades or anything like that. What I've done, I've taken all of his records, and I've put them into separate baskets: the greats, the almost greats, the okays, and the and it's like, yeah, just skip these if you want. So I've gotten that far. I now figured out how I'm going to organize it. Now I need to sit down and do it. And
I'm going to look forward to that since you've dragged me kicking. Since you've dragged me kicking and screaming into your world, I'm going to look forward to that.
And then a baseball project coming up probably end of this week, early next week. Baseball season. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Sorry we kept you so long, but come back next week. We're going to have a guest next week. We're going to have a millennial come on, and we're going to introduce her to a 1970 album, and we want to see what she thinks about it. So that'll be fun. That'll be next week. Check us out at Geezerology.com, and we'll see you on YouTube next week. Thank you. See you, Bob.
All right. See you too, Scott.